try to remember the last time you were really touched by something. And let's take something positive. I think we can all use that. Do you have something in mind? And don't worry, you don't have to tell me. Now try to think of what made this occasion, what made this moment special. Was it something that you expected to happen in the first place? Probably not. Was it something you were consciously striving to achieve? Probably not. In fact, claims Hartmut Rosa, we can only be touched by the uncontrollable. And yet, at the same time, in our daily lives, we notice that all we are trying to do is to control things. We strive for control. We want to know things. We want to be able to grasp things. But how this happens and what the consequences of it are, you will soon hear from our guest, sociologist Hartmut Rosa, and we're very happy that he can be here with us tonight. Hartmut Rosa is professor of sociology at the Friedrich Schiller University in Jena, and he's also the director of the Max Weber Center for Advanced Social and Cultural Studies in Erfurt. You may know him already from his books Social Acceleration and Resonance, and he was already here too in 2017 for a lecture. And last year, no, that's not true. I thought it was last year, but it's longer ago. Anyway, his long-awaited follow-up was published, The Uncontrollability of the World. Thanks for joining us, either here in Theater Lux in Nijmegen or at home through live stream. My name is Liesbeth Jansen. I am a program writer for Radboud Reflects, and I will be your host tonight. The outline of tonight's program is pretty straightforward. You will soon listen to a 40-minute lecture by Hartmut Rosa, and after that he will discuss the topic in more detail with theologian and ethicist Christoph Hübenthaler. Of course, there will be time for your own questions as well, and for you here at Lux, you can simply raise your hands and one of my colleagues will come with a microphone, just as in good old times. And for those of you joining by live stream, you will see a code in your screens, and if you go to the website menti.com, you can enter the code there, and I will get them on my tablet. What else? Yeah, I think you've listened to me long enough. Before we come to listen to Professor Rosa, we have selected a short film from the Nijmegen International Short Film Festival that will take place again in April this year, and they have, especially for us, selected a short film on control. So we'll listen. We will look at that first, but I would like to have a warm applause for Hartmut Rosa already.
All right, looks like a slightly brutal ending, but a quite interesting film, right, about the soundtrack of our lives, maybe even. So thank you very much, Elisabeth, for the kind introduction, and to Radboud Reflects for the invitation. I'm very happy to, first of all, have a chance to talk to real people and not just to screens, right? And also to be back in Nijmegen. As you said, I was here a few years ago. I have very good memories also on the discussions, which I like very much. I always claim that I want to do a form of sociology, which does not contain the idea that I bring my wisdom to the people, right? Because I mean, if you think your wisdom or your insights are created in the ivory tower, then probably the insights are not very valuable, right? I believe my idea is of how we should do social sciences, social philosophy is, right? Having a chance of interpreting the situation we are in, right? Making a suggestion as how we could understand our predicament, right? Our social situation and also our problems. But then you have to discuss it with audiences of all sorts, of all ages, and of all countries, and of all cultures, and of all disciplines. And then you gradually might reformulate your theories and your ideas. And I think we have to, I hope, and I want to do it together with people. I mean, that's really what I want to do. I come up with an idea like resonance, and then I present it to all forms of people, and then I realize, oh, I forgot this aspect, and I have that problem, and the other problem. So I think it's a collaborative effort, and you never reach any end, right? So it goes on and on. So it's beyond our control, right? And this is the topic of what I want to present to you, and then also discuss with Christoph Hübenthal and Elisabeth first, and with all of you second, right? The uncontrollability of the world. I believe that basically what I want to tell you is that modernity is all about trying to. I think I have to stand here for the live stream, right? Otherwise, I create a problem. Normally, I always walk up and down. All right. So we try to bring the world under control. Elisabeth has already hinted at that. But in fact, it doesn't quite work that way. In fact, I would even say it doesn't work for two reasons. One reason is that our attempt at gaining complete control over the world has led to the opposite. The world is becoming, and life is getting more and more uncontrollable, but uncontrollability of a bad sort, I would call it. So that's a problem, right? And the other is that really when you think of what is a good life, I really believe a good life is to be in a kind of constant relationship, in a relationship of listening and answering. That's my basic idea. That's what I call resonance, right? Being in resonance, and you're only in resonance with something that is not completely under control, right? For example, you can be in resonance with a person, but only as long as you do not have complete command or control over him or her. If you're a boss or a general and your soldier or whatever it is, or your slave has to do exactly what you want, then you're not in resonance with him or her, right? And even if you whatever it is, if you're in complete control of something, you might have an instrumental relationship to it, but it's not resonance. So the middle voice, what I mean with the middle voice, I will tell you when we get there, right? Basically, I want to move in the following steps. The first is that I want to develop this claim. I think I need to get my glasses. First of all, to see you, but also to see the screen here. So the first step is I want to develop the idea that our desire for control, or our urge for control, is not just a cultural disposition, a yearning, or a feature of our culture. It's a structural necessity, right? And it leads to a state of aggression towards the world, which has a lot of problematic aspects, which I tried to write about in my book on acceleration. And then the second step, as I already tried to suggest, is that I want to convince you of the fact that our attempt to control the world has paradoxical results. Basically, the idea is we lose the world and we lose life, right? And we even destroy it, right? By our attempts to gain complete control. And then the question is, how could it be different? You know, my resonance book, which is the big book, right? It ends with an optimistic note saying that a different way, a different world is possible, a different form of living is possible. And the question is, what could this form of life be? And I claim it's a form of life which is, at least to some degree, led in the middle voice. And the middle voice is a voice between the active and the passive. And as I said, we will come there in due time. But I want to start by giving you a kind of structural definition of our. I said, oh, I have to stand here. I said, I want to kind of interpret the situation we are in as human beings in the 21st century, right? It's bad enough right now, as you all know. So the question is, how did we get here, and how can we characterize our society or a modern society? And as you know, there's a lot of in Nijmegen as elsewhere, a lot of discussion of what modernity is about, and it's a very problematic term. Some of my colleagues in sociology suggest that we should give up the term modernity altogether because it's value-laden and it's ethnocentric, and there are many different modernities. The Indian modernity is different from the Japanese or the Chinese and so on. But I claim I can give you a structural definition Right? And you can see it there on the screen. A society can be called modern when its mode of stabilization is dynamic, which means when it systematically requires material growth, technological acceleration, and cultural innovation to reproduce its structure and to maintain an institutional status quo. That might sound technical and difficult, but it's very easy. You see it most easily in economic terms, right? I'm pretty sure it's the same in the Netherlands as it is in Germany or elsewhere in Europe or even in Russia, in China, and in the US. Politicians and economists and so on, they claim that we need to achieve economic growth. And the interesting thing is that we do not need growth. And by the way, we achieve growth through acceleration. And if we don't grow, if an economy, like in Japan for many years, if an economy doesn't grow, you need acceleration nevertheless. You even need more acceleration, which means you need to be the first and the fastest and so on in order to keep the number of jobs, etc. So what I want to say is our economy, if we start with that, can only maintain its structure. What do I mean with structure? The number of jobs, the number of companies, and the strength of companies, and so on, and the whole economic fabric. And actually, with the economic fabric comes the old age pension schemes and the healthcare systems and the cultural institutions like a university and so on. We can only maintain it if we grow year by year by year. Right? Germany now has a new government, somehow supposed to be to the left of the older government. And all three parties insist that we need to keep the growth engines fired and going. Right? We want to grow out of the crisis, they say. Right? But the interesting question is, do we want to grow? Do we need growth in order to change, to get somewhere? I claim this would be a kind of natural state of affairs, to run fast in order to achieve a goal, a finishing line, right? That's a normal human way of behaving. And also, if you're hungry, if you don't have enough bread here, we somehow need to grow and produce more bread in order to feed our hunger. And if you don't have enough clothes and you feel cold in the winter, you need growth in order to have enough clothing. But the problem is that those who can pay already have enough of everything. Right? We eat too much. I mean, it's a perverse state of affairs, and I want to hammer it to audiences all over the world because it seems to me so obvious. I mean, think of our three parties in the German government. They claim we want growth, right? So I actually ask them, so in which sector exactly do you want to grow? Do you want to produce more cars? Now we have Greens, right? That they would say, oh no, not more cars. Okay. Not cars. So let's produce more planes. I mean, the air industries have been growing immensely, exploding almost before Corona. Of course, the Greens would say, "Oh no, not in the airplane system." So okay, let's not talk about transport. So what do you want to produce? More houses? I mean, the building economy is very important. So they try to build more houses. All the companies working in the construction sector want to achieve growth. They need to achieve growth. Next year, build more houses than this year. But actually, that's not such a good idea. I'm not exactly sure about Holland or the Netherlands. I think you have the same problem as we have everywhere in Middle Europe. There's already not enough green spaces, right? So to permanently grow in the housing sector is not very good. So those parties will say, oh, no, not in that sector. So I say, okay, not there. So where do you want to grow, right? In clothing, do we have to change them even faster? We throw them away. All of the clothes you wear, you probably throw away before they are worn out, right? Because they are out of fashion or so on. And most of the clothing is produced in Bangladesh or elsewhere anyway, so that's not a good idea. So do you want to produce more computers or more smartphones? Not such a good idea either. More weapons. This is the new hit, right? So we will produce more weapons, okay. But we could produce more food, for example. Actually, every sector in the economy wants to grow and needs growth in order to maintain what they have. Right, so we can produce more food, but those who can afford to buy it are already, actually we are obese, we eat too much. Do you know how they achieve growth? They achieve it by inserting certain substances like enzymes. I have no idea what that is in English. Enzyme, you understand that, right? Certain substances into the food in order to, for what? In order to somehow stop the signal which is sent from the stomach to the brain. Normally, when you eat and you have enough, there's a signal from the stomach to the brain which says you're full, stop it. Now they have found ways to somehow stop that signal, so you keep eating even though you already have enough, right? So I mean, that's where we are as a society. You need to achieve growth next year. I don't know how much the gross domestic product of the Netherlands is, but no matter how big it is, next year you have to build more, buy more, construct more, fly more, use more computers and so on. You have to exchange them faster and faster just to maintain the system. And I insist that this is a perverse state of affairs. It has never been like that in any culture or society we know of in human history. But I'm not saying that it's perverse to grow or to accelerate generally. It's good if you want to change, but that you have to innovate all the time and to innovate. I mean, it's the three things you see there: innovate, grow, and accelerate. Just to stay where you are. That's perverse. I'm sorry. And I mean. And it's very interesting. When modernity, this is my definition of modernity, this logic, I call it dynamic stabilization. Maintain what you have by increasing, right? It comes to us through the logic of optimization. Everything has to be optimized, improved. Somehow it has to be made faster, more efficient, and so on. No, I forgot what I wanted to say. Okay, I mean, this is the logic of modern society, and I claim that this is deeply problematic. Oh no, I know what I wanted to say. Yeah, it started in the 18th century, and at that time, I really believe this. I call it modernity, the structural heart of modernity. But of course, it had a kind of cultural promise. Right? And of course, it's very obvious what this promise is. The idea was that this acceleration, growth, innovation was moving forward. It's connected to our conception of progress. I mean, it's so obvious, right? Yes, we can produce more food and more houses. And that means we can overcome hunger and scarcity and cold and so on. And also, through the progress of science, we will overcome ignorance. And even through acceleration, we will overcome time scarcity. So you could see, social research sometimes is very useful, and they could actually tell you that even in bad times, or at least apart from the very worst times, right, parents would all over the Western world or the modern world say, we work as hard as we can in order for our kids to have a better life. And this was kind of propelling us forward, right? Our kids will have a better life. And what kind of better life is that? It's a life which is in which you don't have to struggle for your existence all the time, right? So accelerating, growing, innovating was moving forward. And now the problem is, as I said, we already have enough houses and cars and clothes and computers and food and even drugs, right? But we still have to grow, not in order to move forward, but to stay where we are. And while we run faster and faster each year, next year you have to run faster, no matter how fast you already are, you're not moving towards the new horizon, right? You're running away from the abyss which coming from behind, which is unemployment, which is economic downfall, which is global disaster, climate change, and so on. So now the abyss is coming from behind, and you run faster and faster just to keep your place. That's a problematic situation. That's my take of the situation we are in. Nevertheless, my second claim is that we are not just the victims of this logic of acceleration, innovation, growth, of dynamic stabilization. There is also an element of aspiration which is driving us, a cultural promise. Actually, I claim a conception of the good life, right? And this conception of the good life, I think I've put it somewhere down here, the AAA horizon of the good life. My claim is, probably all of us, I simply claim it, and if you think I'm wrong, you just tell me afterwards. You say that's completely wrong, right? But I ask myself and others, what do you use the word good for? Good, something is good, right? So if in conversation you say, oh, that's really good, I'm pretty sure, I believe I can show that most of the time, good means expanding something that expands the horizon of what is available, attainable, or accessible, or controllable. Controllability is my blanket term for this, basically, right? So, for example, if I tell you, oh, you know what, my salary has increased, I earn more money, probably a lot of people will say, oh, that's really good. So why is it good, right? Because money, your bank account tells you what your possible share of the world is, right? If you have a lot of money on your bank account, then you can afford flying to Rio or Chicago or Tokyo or whatever it is. I mean, apart from Corona and war and so on, right? Let's just go back to the world before 2020. So the bank account told you literally how much of the world was within your reach, right? If you have a lot of money saved or you're on a bank account, then going for a shopping trip to New York is within reach, or going on holidays to the Maldives is within reach. And if you're extremely rich, like Bezos and Musk and all these other idiots, sorry to say, then you expand the horizon of what is available to you to outer space. That's what they actually do, right? They really want to bring they want to convince yourself, now we can even go to outer space. That's good. Apparently that's good for them. Otherwise they wouldn't do it, right? But it's not just in physical, in geographical or territorial scales that increasing the horizon of availability is good. It's in all forms, right? For example, I mean, why do most people want to live in big cities rather than small cities? If you ask youngsters, I mean, maybe small cities are okay. A city like Nijmegen certainly has its charm, right? Jena is even smaller, but also nice. But young people certainly don't want to live in a village. Why not? I come from a village and all our youngsters run away. And why? Oh, they will tell you, oh, when I go to Amsterdam, for example, right? There are all the museums, there's the opera, the theaters, I don't know what else, the cinemas and so on. They might never go to the opera or the theater or the museum or the zoo. But it's available, it's attainable on an everyday reach, right? Or why is a smartphone so irresistible, right? All the time and it's not just the young, right? Also the old, we are all the time. I mean, it's amazing. If we were aliens watching us, we would really think it's a new disease, right? So why is this so attractive? It's obvious, because I have now all the world available in my pocket. All the music that was ever recorded is just 2 clicks away. And all the knowledge, which is in Wikipedia or so, just 2 clicks away. And all my friends, and even my enemies, unfortunately, are just 2 clicks away, right? So we have made the world available, attainable, accessible. So my claim here is, it's our conception of the good and of the good life. Life is good when the horizon of what you can attain, access, make available is increasing, right? So And this kind of runs together in a logic of controllability. We want to bring the world within reach, make it controllable. I want, I want to have an internet connection. Why? Because then I can bring the world home, right? And I want to have the chance to go to other places, right? I mean, for example, there's a cruise. You can book a cruise. I have to hurry up. It's my first slide. Okay, you can book a cruise which gives you a polar light guarantee, right? So if you book this cruise, you're guaranteed you will see the polar lights. If you don't see the polar lights in the northern Atlantic or so, right, then you will get your money back, right? So you even kind of want to bring this under control. I want to have a guarantee. I've paid for it, and so on. So far, you see, what this runs up to, I claim, is that what we do is we want to on the one hand, we are structurally forced because of the logic of dynamic stabilization. And on the other hand, we are culturally driven towards a program that brings the world under control, scientifically, technologically, economically, politically, and so on. And when I talk about controllability, I believe what you see here, right, is this logic of making things visible. For example, with telescope looking towards the outer universe, with microscopes making visible what is in the micro world, right? But then also accessible. We want to get there with the satellites and with the rockets and with the airplanes and so on, but also with the endoscopes into our bodies and so. So controllability for me means making things visible, then making things accessible. We want to get there. We want to have a handle on it. Then making things controllable. We want to control the world. Look how we control, for example, the room here, the space, right? We can, with a click, if you have the remote control, right? You can make it bright light or dark night. You can make it very hot, or you can make it very cold. You can play loud music, or you can make it completely silent. So we have control over the world and over our atmosphere. So we're driven towards that, forced on the one hand, culturally driven on the second hand. Now this leads to a state of what I call aggression towards the world. We are forced into a form of whatever you see, whatever you hear, whatever there is, we have to bring it under control, right? The world as it appears, when you wake up in the morning, the world is there as a kind of a field of points of attack, right? For example, it's very interesting. How do you wake up in the morning? Not because the sun comes up, for example, right? Not because you slept enough, but because your alarm clock is alarming you, right? I mean, it's interesting that we call it alarm clock. So you jump out of bed, I have to get ready, right, in order to fetch the bus or whatever it is that you have to do, right? So, and then you encounter your to-do list, and the to-do list is your points of attack, right? I have to write that message, I have to call that person, I have to read that essay or whatever it is. So it's a number of things which you have to bring under control, right? To get done. So the world or reality is experienced as a field of resistance also. I think I'll leave it at this. I mean, if whoever wants to have it can get the slides. We put it on the desktop there, right? But the claim is the modernity is a form of relating to the world, which is on the one hand declaring spiritual independence, which means it should not be nature who tells us what to do. It should not be history who tells us what to do. It's us who decide. We bring nature and history and whatever there is under our control. And then we decide. So it's the paradigm of sovereignty and autonomy are the kind of the cultural equivalents to this. Have I done something wrong? Oh, I have done something wrong. Okay, no, okay. Now the interesting. Now I come to the flip side, right? And my claim is that this program of making the world available, attainable, accessible, controllable, doesn't quite deliver its promise. In fact, it leads to the opposite. And I find this really interesting. It's kind of one of the last good. I believe it's a good idea, right? I had that. I really think our way of being in the world is permanently kind of flipping back and forth between, on the one hand, a promise of omnipotence. You can do everything. And on the other hand, the experience of powerlessness, I can do nothing, right? And what do I mean here? I think the paradigm case when I came up with this idea was when I was reading a kind of a piece by Oppenheimer, who managed to split the atom, right? Nuclear fissure, right? So to speak, splitting the atom, he said, makes us somehow almost godlike, and I completely understand it. I share this idea with him. He says, now we are at the inside of matter. We can control matter from the inside, the atom, right? This is a kind of experience of almost omnipotence, right? Now we are inside the heart of matter. But the problem was that this gave us an experience of extreme powerlessness with a nuclear explosion, be it a power plant or be it a bomb, right? So my claim is that on the one hand, this feeling of active omnipotence created the counter sense of extreme powerlessness. And it's the same basically on another scale with our relationship towards nature. We have come to really control and dominate nature on so many levels of our lives. As I just said, we decide whether it's bright light or dark night or hot or cold. So we are dominating nature. But the problem is thereby we feel completely powerless in face of the climate disaster, which is coming, which is around the door, right? So our experience of omnipotence is somehow turning around, and we feel totally powerless in face of the heat and the dearth and the tsunami and the water rising and so on, right? So again, there's a kind of omnipotence. We control nature, and then there is this kind of the opposite, feeling totally powerless. And I believe the problem of democracy we have in our societies, right, is directly related to this, because this logic of control has a political side, right? It's the promise of popular sovereignty, right? That at the heart of democracy, and I think it's good. I don't want to criticize that. Is the idea that all the power rests with the people. It rests with us, right? Popular sovereignty says all the power rests with the people. Omnipotence. But the experience of people in our society is that they can't do anything, right? Theoretically, we can democratically control and steer the world, but practically, unfortunately, there are the military powers and the financial markets and the logic of whatever. We can't do anything. And I believe right-wing populism is a kind of reaction to this, because the right-wing populist leaders kind of, like in Brexit, what the Brexit slogan was? Take back control, right? Live up to the promise of having control over your life. But I believe in the political realm, there's also this kind of going back and forth. On the one hand, we are promised omnipotence. On the other hand, people experience extreme political powerlessness. But another very interesting case, there you can really feel it in your own body. I mean, there's a number of interesting empirical research on this. With a remote control in your smart home or in your car, you're kind of omnipotent. I've said it now already 2 times. Okay, all good things are 3 times. So once again, I'm omnipotent. I can make it hot or cold or bright light, dark night, loud and soft and so on, until the remote control fails or something technologically is wrong. And then I cannot turn off the music anymore, right? I cannot turn down the heat. Or for example, I got locked in my car once, right? Because of all the safety, I want to have everything under control. Unfortunately, you could not go out. And I could not go out, right? Sometimes you can't get in and sometimes you can't get out. And what is very interesting is that the experience of powerlessness there is so brutal. The world has always been resistant. But normally when a door locks or so, you somehow try to use more force. Or you might even take a hammer or so, right? Or some tools. But in this modern world, the problem is the handle goes down very easily. There's absolutely no resistance, but the door would still not move. And there is nothing I can do, absolutely nothing. I mean, it's the same with the computer, right? If the remote, as I said, I'm omnipotent, right? All my friends 2 clicks away, all the music 2 clicks away, until this thing for some reason is kind of breaking down. And then it says, just a moment, please, for hours, right? And there's absolutely nothing I can do. And this feeling of powerlessness is very interesting. I believe it produces the anger which is in the world. There's a lot of anger. And this anger is coming from this very, very delicate, fragile way of relating to the world. My physical powers, my grip, my tool, what I can do with my body is kind of completely, it's without any efficacy in this world, right? So I leave this. I mean, of course, my book on uncontrollability ends with something, of course, it was kind of, you can say it, good luck. Because it ends with the last chapter in that book is, it's not yet in Dutch, but it will come out I think in September or so. And the last chapter says the return of uncontrollability in the form of a monster, right? And of course, those are the monsters on the right hand. But I mean, we see a lot of monsters in recent times. I find this really fascinating. If you think of pre-2016, people in Holland or in the Netherlands or in Germany somehow felt that they are kind of living in a predictable world, in a controllable world, right? Controllable and predictable is very close. And then we had to suffer quite a number of shocks, right? I mean, one shock was that something like Trump was possible, right? All of a sudden, our political world seemed to be very shaky, right? And then the Brits decided to leave the EU. And no one would have thought of this, that the EU was not becoming more and more solid, unified and bigger, but somehow breaking apart, right? And then, of course, COVID came along. Right? And you could not even, the horizon of availability and accessibility and attainability overnight, it was within a few days, it shrank to your home when you were in lockdown, right? What is available and attainable and accessible to you are just a few yards around your house, and that's it. So this is really a shock to a world which tries to control and expand the horizon of everything. And now even war is coming back. And by the way, also the financial markets in 2008, right? They proved to be monsters of uncontrollability. No one can control the financial markets anymore. So my claim is, right, that our program of controlling the world is failing because it produces monstrous forms of non-controllability. People don't have control over their lives. You even see it on an everyday level, right? I mean, when kids get their high school diploma, right? The grown-ups would tell them, oh, now you're really lucky and happy. The world is open to you, right? The world is within your reach. And in fact, if you talk to high school kids, they are mortally afraid. Because, for example, in Germany, they have 19,549 different courses of study to select from. And now, and all the clever coaches tell them, oh, you have to carefully decide what you want and what you need and what you can do. And then you have to find the right program and to match it. And then you have a good life. It's totally impossible to do this, right? No one knows exactly what his or her needs and desires and capabilities are. And it's impossible to find the right course out of 19,900. So I really always try to tell my students, the freshmen in particular, probably they are no longer called freshmen, the first-year students, right? That it's not about the perfect match. It's about appropriation, which accepts a lot of uncontrollability, being in the middle voice. And this is what I will finish with. I have 10 more minutes, I believe, right? Okay. I mean, this is the idea of the middle voice. I will abbreviate it. You know, what I wanted to say with the omnipotence and the powerlessness is, I believe, connected to our language, even European languages, right? We only know the active mode. I am in control, so to speak, right? Or the passive mode. I am controlled. Or I throw something, or I am thrown, to use a philosophical concept, right? It's active or passive. I'm the subject of something happening or the object of it. But the most interesting things, the experiences which you value most, are when you cannot tell whether you are active or passive because you are in between, right? And to abbreviate it, my favorite example here, we discussed it over lunch or over dinner, right? Is, for example, in a dance, you know this famous Yeats quote, who can tell the dancer, who can tell the dancer from the dance? And I interpreted it this way. You know, normally when you dance, for example, you're a couple dancing, then one is giving the lead and the other is kind of following, right? And then it might turn around and the first person is giving or the second person is giving the lead and the first person is kind of reacting to it. But at the moment when the dance is at its climax, at the height, you cannot tell whether you're leading or whether you are led. Right? It's in between, and that's what Yeats in his poem means, right? The dance is kind of dancing the dancers. It's even producing the dancers. And a lot of people making music know this experience. And by the way, also people doing sports, like in a soccer game, when you no longer can tell whether you're reacting to a movement or where you're initiating it, right? Those are moments of mediopassivity, right? A mediopassive is a linguistic term, which means a mode which is in between the active and the passive. And we have it, we can sometimes, like it snows, right? We say, right, it snows. My book starts with snowfall, right? It snows is a kind of mediopassive thing because you don't know who is snowing and who is snowed to. No, you cannot tell it, right? It snows is a kind of mediopassive. And in the Bible or so, you have it in old fairy tales. There you often find the sentence, and it just so happened. It happened, right? So there is not a doer and a done to, but it's a kind of unfolding doing. And now I claim those are the happiest moments in your life, like all of a sudden it starts to snow, right, for example. Or when you listen to music, by the way, it's very hard to tell whether this is an active or a passive thing. I mean, think of it. You listen to beautiful music. Is it active or is it passive? It's very hard to say. I find English language is better than German there. In German, we only have hören. But in English, I would say there is the listening, which is somehow active. I'm listening. But there is the hearing, which is rather passive. Something comes to me, right? And there's this in-between. And you don't have complete control. If you hear, you cannot actually close off your ears. You can try, but it's not easy, right? So it's a mediopassivity is in between the active and the passive. And that's what I call, let's forget about this. Let's go to this, right? Therefore, I want to say what I want to claim, my basic claim, and hopefully we can discuss it a bit more later on, is that a good life is not having complete control over the world. Why not? Because on the one hand, we destroy the world, right? And the world becomes monstrously uncontrollable. But on the other hand, because the thing which you have complete control over is dead for you. It's not speaking to you. You feel alienated from it. I would really think of love relationships. If you have complete control over something, you cannot be in resonance with it. It doesn't give you anything. But it's even if you can I have 2 more hours, please? No, I mean there is I have 2 examples. I can't decide which one to use. Okay, I go back to my cat, right? If a lot of you probably have at home a cat or a dog, right? A pet, maybe another pet, but I know cats and dogs, right? And why are they valuable to us, for example, right? Because we have some control over them, but not complete control over them, right? When the cat comes to you, when you come home, for example, the cat comes and it will purr and it will sneak around your legs and so on, and it wants to be caressed and so on. But sometimes it's in a bad mood, so it won't purr. And sometimes it's it's even in a worse mood, it will actually lash out and hit me, right? And it's this element of uncontrollability, of its own agency, that I value most. Because otherwise, you know, a cat has some bad sides. As I said, sometimes it hits me quite badly, and sometimes it would be sick, and so on. So why not have a robot cat who would purr every time you come home, right? Of course, you know, that somehow would do the trick. So I thought, okay, let's program, or let's assume a robot cat with some random function, right? So the robot cat would come most of the times I come home, but sometimes it wouldn't come. It's a random function, right? But still, actually, it wouldn't give me anything, right? I would say, okay, today the program is such that it doesn't come. So I thought, okay, but maybe we can come up with a more clever robot cat, a cat that learns, and it reacts to me, right? Artificial intelligence, I know, I think in Nijmegen you have a program of this, and in Groningen also, right? They can kind of have learning robots, so the robot cat would react to me. And wouldn't that be resonance, listening and answering? And I think if I had a cat like this, I would try to find out which of my actions would trigger what kind of response, right? So that's not resonance. Resonance, what I will define in a minute, requires that you are in contact with something that you cannot completely control. Another example here is, I have to speed up, I wrote on acceleration, right? You know, I mean, it's even if you have plants at your home, right? Why don't you have a plastic plant, right? You can have the plastic plant blossom all the time, right? And it can have exactly the shape you want it to be in. But if you have a real flower, it's beyond control. Sometimes it would die, sometimes it would not produce blossoms and so on, and that's exactly it, right? You're in contact with something that has a voice of its own, so to speak, right? And this, I believe, is happiness, and this is what we have forgotten as a culture and as individuals. So what we need is resonance, and resonance is exactly the third voice, and it has 4 elements, right? Resonance is not an emotional state. Resonance is a form of relationship, and it has 4 elements. Something speaks to me, something touches me, right? Something addresses me. So, you know, when you are in an everyday mode of working on your to-do list, on the list of aggression, points of aggression, right? Then we are close to the world, and then all of a sudden you hear a music, or you see a face, or a sunset, or you read something. It can be within your work task, but nevertheless, all of a sudden, our armor is kind of broken. There's a crack in everything, right? And something gets through and touches us. You can see it when you give a talk or a discussion. You can see at some points, oh, there is a point of resonance, because actually the eyes of the listeners, if you're in a classroom, most kids would sit there, right, sleeping, bored, on their cell phones, or outright hostile, right? But all of a sudden there's kind of resonance, and you see all the eyes kind of interacting, right? They're listening, and it's not just listening is the first moment, right? Something speaks to me. The second element is you respond to it. You respond to it physically. You open up, but you also respond by something is happening within you. You start to think, and this thinking might be not agreeing, rejecting, right? Disagreeing. So resonance is not complete agreement. Resonance is a reaction where you feel, that's the second element, self-efficacy. I can react to it and do something with this thing. So that's resonance, something going back and forth, like in the dance. I'm sometimes leading, I'm sometimes led, and the new is kind of created in between, right? For example, in a discussion, which we will have in a few minutes, in 2 minutes, I'm done, I swear, right? So I can deliver a speech as I always deliver, then there's no resonance. And maybe you ask questions you always ask, there's no question, no resonance either. But maybe all of a sudden you ask something and someone responds, and another one comes up with an idea he or she never had before, and then the new is born. That's what Hannah Arendt calls natality, right? The new is born out of moments of resonance which are not under our control, not predictable and bought and paid for, and it's not coming with a kind of judicial claim or so. And if this happens, we are transformed, right? If we have a resonant discussion, then when we leave the room, we somehow think differently of the world and of ourselves. It does not have to be dramatic. Sometimes it's dramatic, but sometimes it's only a tiny new thought we have, right? But resonance is a kind of transforming us, and I believe this is what we are desiring, what we are yearning for, this moment of being touched, responding and being transformed. But the problem is, as I said, and this is why the book is called Uncontrollability, Or another term for the German term is Unverfügbarkeit. You cannot translate this, right? But non-engineerability I like a lot, right? The problem is with resonance, you cannot fabricate it. You cannot make it, right? You cannot buy it. Of course you can buy the Polar Lights Guarantee Cruise. But this doesn't mean that it really touches you, transforms you, that something new is born out of it. You yearn for this moment of touch and so on. But by having it paid, right? By saying tomorrow night at 7, I want to see the polar light, but at 7:30, I want to have my coffee, right? If you do it like this, it's very unlikely that you get in resonance. So resonance is uncontrollable or non-engineerable in a twofold sense. Number one is, go back to our discussion, right? It might be that we will have no resonance tonight. It happens, right? Maybe I'm non-inspired, maybe you are not inspired, maybe Christoph's talk is kind of talking past me or so. It sometimes happens, right? But sometimes there is resonance, right? But the interesting thing is that absolutely no one could predict where it happens tonight and when it happens, what the thought will be that is triggered by what kind of interaction, right? So I really believe resonance is essentially non-predictable. It might happen, but what the result will be if we manage to somehow create a discussion between us, no one can predict. So resonance, I would claim as the real core of the good life, is in its essence uncontrollable. And if you want to make the world completely controllable, we produce monsters of uncontrollability and monstrous unhappiness. And I think that's what I wanted to say. Thank you very much, and sorry for being too long.
Thanks a lot. Please join me in the seat. Sorry, I'm trying to get back to the PowerPoint.
Sorry.
No problem. I just don't know how to fix this. So I guess one of my colleagues will come to help me out. Please sit down, both of you. Thanks a lot. That was a lot of input in the 40 minutes that I gave you. So we'll have about half an hour time to discuss it. So I will start with you, Christoph, because people don't know you yet, and maybe some people will think, well, we've listened to a sociologist, the word God, well, maybe it's you used it once, so we didn't talk about church. Why invite a theologian to discuss this topic? So that would be my first question. What's interesting for you in this whole topic?
I think there are two things. Very generally speaking, there are two things which are interesting to a theologian. The first thing is simply the sociological analysis. I think this is a description of our society, and of course, sociologists provide many different descriptions. You can have a system theory or something like this. Right, yeah. But to theologians, sometimes this can help a lot, but sometimes it's boring. This is a critical analysis of our society, and of course, as a theologians, you have to have a stance towards society, whatever it is. So I think this is the inspiring thing for a theologian. But the other thing, I think I have to confess, this is more interesting to me, is the fact that resonance or uncontrollability, you did not mention this, but this is a term which comes from theology.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
At least the German, das Unverfügbare is which stems from Bultmann. I learned it from his book. So there's a fertilization from theology to sociology, but I think the other way around is also true, and particularly the concept of resonance, I think can be very helpful for doing theology and also for doing a critical theology.
And how?
Because the point is that resonance. I think you explained it very well. Yeah, it's your concept. But that you have to have two partners and something happens in between, and this is so important. And we have many theological approaches, particularly in the 20th century and also in the 21st century, which do not make a distinction between God and man, or God and the human being. So either the human being is totally ontologically dependent on God, and something as resonance is impossible in that. Or another model is that God is the absolute sovereign, who is so to speak, who's creating the subject which resonates with him. But does not fit with or match with the concept of resonance. And in that respect, I think resonance is a very good term because it helps us, on the one hand, to make a clear distinction between God and the human being, and on the other hand, that there is something that happens in between, and there can be a kind of unity. I think it's very attractive. I do not know whether I will do this, but to think about a resonance Christology, where the human and the divine nature in Christ form a unity. At the same time, they are separable or they're distinguishable entities. So, and that's more attractive to a theologian, even though I also appreciate, of course, the sociological analysis.
But what would it mean? What would the consequences be if you would use this type of theology, if you would look at God and man being in resonance with each other? What would happen? What would change?
I think in your book, you say at a certain concept and at a certain place, you say that you think that the Judeo-Christian tradition is about resonance.
Yes.
And I wholeheartedly endorse this, but at the same time, I said I wished it was so, because of these other theological models, which do not allow for thinking as the autonomy, in a sense, or the independence of creation of the human being over against God, but at the same time, the absolute desire for a resonance with the divine. So, and I think this concept makes it clear, and can help theologians to articulate their own position.
Yes. While I was listening to your lecture, my colleague bowed to me and said, "You know, this is really overwhelming," and she didn't mean your speed of talking, thinking of the way we try to control the world and the consequences it has. Is there a way out?
Yeah, the way out is resonance.
Yes.
That
cannot be bought. I mean, it cannot be controlled.
No,
so, what can we do?
I think it's very difficult. It really is difficult. I mean, I think I totally agree also with what Christoph Hübenthal just said. I think, religion. I mean, for me, I'm a sociologist, right? So I cannot accept, as not in my function as a sociologist, any metaphysical assumptions. But I believe the idea of a God, right, is the idea that at the bottom of our existence, there is a kind of answering universe and not the silent universe, right? And I believe people need this experience somehow, right, of being connected. I mean, I found it very interesting as a sociologist when I asked myself, what are people doing when they pray, for example, right? Because the interesting thing, it seemed to me, the question I had was, is praying turning inward or is it turning outward? And what I realized and what I was amazed about is that I thought it's turning in both directions simultaneously. It's turning inward and turning outward. And it's exactly, this is why I talk about axis of resonance. My innermost core, the bottom of my existence, Martin Buber would write about this, right, is somehow connected to the ultimate encompassing reality. But this is an experience, I think, some people find it in nature if they don't find it in religion, right? I mean, today I was in Den Haag yesterday, so I went to Scheveningen, right, to the North Sea, and standing at the ocean, right? I'm not even sure whether you could call that ocean, but yeah, why not? I mean, it's towards the Atlantic, right? And you feel the waves rolling in. You really feel how your body changes its whole posture, right? You feel the waves rolling in and the wind, and it's somehow feeling connected. My inner, and a lot of people say only at the ocean or in the mountains I can feel myself. It's the same axis, right? My innermost with the outermost. And when you listen to music in art, it's the same experience, right? People close their eyes. Even a punk musician like Henry Rollins says, music is closer to myself than my own breath. So it's my innermost reality. It's coming from the outside. So on the one hand, I want to say it's not something beyond our culture or conception, right? But on the other hand, we discussed this yesterday in Den Haag, the Uncontrollability book ends in very pessimistic notes. And it's very pessimistic because I think, we would be mad to intentionally give up control, right? I mean, of course, I don't suggest, oh, let's go hungry again, right? Oh, let's get cold again or so, right? Or let's no longer use. I would not even say let's no longer use the smartphone or so, right? It would be somehow mad, and it would not deliver what we want, right? And it actually, you're bringing everything under control. I have a chapter which I find very important in our bureaucracies, right? Even the desire for justice, right, and transparency is kind of, when you discuss it with people, right, very often it's killing resonance, I would say. Let me give you one short example. For example, there are young people, right? They want to, I believe in Nijmegen you could have the experience. They want to create something, right? Let's build a house of music here or so, right? And because actually in Leipzig, the story is this: the mayor of Leipzig said there was a kind of setting. What would it need to turn Leipzig into a resonant space, a resonant city, right? And then he came up with this example. You have young people who want to make Leipzig, their city, resonate with it. And they come up with a great idea, and they would say, let's build this house. And then he would say, oh, that's a great idea, that's fantastic. You see the beaming eyes, you see the resonance. But first we have to get the money, might take 2 years. Then we have to get admission from that bureaucracy. Then we have to test it for safety and for security. And then you see how the eyes close down again. It's kind of, so what do we do here? I don't want to say let's forget about finance and let's forget about safety. So I don't see, and transparency and anti-corruption and whatever you have to, so I ended in pessimistic notes and thought, let's turn to the theologian to answer that.
Perhaps I can raise a critical question, because I think you do as if resonance was possible with every. You speak of a section of the world, so it can be different axes. So the horizontal axe, which is interpersonal, the vertical axe with the transcendence, whatever, the diagonal,
but now I call it material because diagonal is too confusing.
Okay, but anyway, but my question isn't the horizontal axis, also the interpersonal? Yes. Isn't this the paradigm?
No.
Because the uncontrollable is due to the freedom of the other. The freedom of the other. Yes. He's always free to react differently. And the uncontrollability of the world, of other parts of the world, pets, you talked about pets, is of a different dimension, is of a different kind, but you would not agree to that.
No, I want to disagree with it. But I think this is what a theologian probably needs to say. No, but I think the point really is what really struck me is that you're absolutely right. I mean, I have these 4 axes. I think I had it on the slides, but I left it out. That we can get in resonance with each other, with other people, in love or in friendship. I believe even democracy is the idea of having a kind of citizenship which is in resonance. So I think there we agree on then. But then I think this is what we think in modernity. But it's not the only dimension of resonance, right? For me, I really claim there is material resonances. We resonate with objects, with a space, for example, but also with some artifacts, objects of art or so, but also materialities with wood or with whatever, with snow, for example, right?
Yeah. And I think I find it very interesting what you said, like 2 minutes ago, that we as humans, maybe we have this basic need, or desire at least, to resonate with other people, with the world around us, and maybe that's also the connection between what you call the transcendent.
Yeah, but I think theologians have the idea that, and sometimes I think they are right? I don't know. As I said, I don't want to have the wisdom. I don't know. Let's discuss it. But I think there is a tendency in theology and in modernity to think that the only resonant thing is other human beings, and the rest of the world is silent and dead. So we have to bring it under our control. I mean, that's what Latour in this say, right? Modern beings are the only beings who live in a totally silent universe. And if you could turn to poetry, for example, Walter Benjamin or Rilke or so, right? They remind you, and you see it with children, of course, who live in an animated world. They would talk to the how is this thing called? I forgot.
Carpet.
The carpet, yes, and to all the other things, right? And an animated world, a living world. We are in contact with the stars and with the planets and with everything. So the fact that we think all of this is dead, the only one resonating is me and the other human beings is true.
Yes, so that's what is sorry. So that's what is happening. That we have a very basic human need to resonate at all, and then first we have declared the outer world dead, and now we're trying to sort of make the other also something that we need
yes,
to.
I mean, we want the other to shut up, right? I mean, think of democracy, right? The problem with democracy right now is we don't want to listen to the other and be transformed by it. But we think of the others either as Nazis or as traitors also. It's true. And we don't even want to listen to our own body and psyche. We would just want to bring it under control. All right, I want to be able to sleep immediately in the evening, and I want to wake up immediately in the morning, and I want to have my heart pressure or my heartbeat at the right rate, and my blood pressure at the right rate, and everything. And even I want to have my eyes different, so I go to the doctor, and so on. So it's really we are dislearning being in resonance with anything. But sorry, you.
But I think you are right. This is the kind of disenchantment of modernity, so that we resonate. If at all, only with other human beings, but the rest of the world. But this is not what I wanted to say. So I fully agree that it's possible to resonate with the sunset or with music or whatever. But the question is, if you the metaphors you use to describe resonance, always presuppose some kind of agency behind. So something speaks to me.
Yes.
That's why I thought that the interpersonal relationship is a kind of paradigm, not denying that the other forms of resonance are also possible. And that's I do not want to immediately go to transcendence or.
No, but I agree with you.
But.
No, I agree with it.
Yeah.
Sorry.
But not immediately go to transcendence. But then, if this were right, that this is a special form of resonance which we have with other human beings or with other persons, then you speak about the desire for the uncontrollable.
Yeah.
Then we could say that we perhaps have a desire to resonate with something which we cannot describe, or which we have not access in that kind. Of course, it must be accessible, so it cannot be the absolute hidden God or whatever. But that we have that desire to resonate with something which is beyond this world, or which is different from this world.
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. So you're saying we have a desire to resonate with things that are within this world, so sunset or people, and maybe we also have another desire to resonate with something that we cannot control, because it's.
Of course, we cannot control.
No, but this is the problem. I think that's wrong. No, I mean, I think. I think it's not enough. I don't know. I mean, for me, I always discuss this, right? For me, the world is everything there is. So if there is a God, he's part of the world. I mean, that's just the way I would think of him or her, right? I mean, the world is, when you wake up, if you're unconscious also, it's really true. If you wake up out of unconsciousness or out of deep sleep, before you know that who you are, and even that you are, that's what Merleau-Ponty says. He says, something is there, something is present, is the first moment of our consciousness. And only later on I realize, oh, that's me, and who am I? Oh, yeah, sometimes you don't know, and you don't know where you are, and so on. And then the world takes shape, but this separation between me and the world already is a kind of secondary step, right? So I think if there is a God, for me, he's part of the world. He's part of what is there, waiting for me when I wake up, right? Either within me or outside of me. I find this very strange, this dualism, that on the one hand there's a word, and then there's something beyond the world. I mean, it can be a different world, but it's still part of the world for me. But, to think that resonance is only possible with the thing beyond the world, while within the world everything is dead and under control, I think that's exactly the mistake we made.
Okay, let's get out of this very theoretical discussion. And let's get to something very concrete, because
Can I make one?
Yes, one.
I'm sorry,
sure.
Non-disciplined, but I totally agree with you. I think this is something I have to reflect on with the agency thought, right? It's really true. I believe you can only be in resonance with something to which you attribute at least some form of resonance, like a mountain or so, or a piece of music or so. I really, in the book, I permanently, or I, like a leitmotif I use, the Igor Levitz playing the Moonlight Sonata by Beethoven, right? And there he experiences this Moonlight Sonata as somehow always beyond my control. I cannot really get it under control. And now we think, oh, it's Beethoven, but maybe it's not Beethoven, because in the sonata there's something of his time and something of the logic of Western music and so on, and something of music generally. So there is a kind of agency for him in the sonata. So I agree with the agency aspect. Sorry.
No. I wanted to ask, because before today, when I spoke to people about you coming here and giving a lecture about uncontrollability and how, this is something we are losing and we need to get it back, and people said, well, there's a war in Ukraine. If there's something that's uncontrollable, then it's something like that. Can we still speak of uncontrollability as something positive?
I think we can. Because the war in the Ukraine is the monster of uncontrollability. That's what it's really true. I'm not praising uncontrollability per se. That would, as I said, that would just be stupid, right? So like let's not defend against wars or against disease because that's uncontrollable. That would be wrong, right? So I distinguish my claim in the book is that we have to, actually, I think you can only be in resonance with something that is. And then I did not come up with a good term. It's either half controllable, maybe you could say, right, or reachable. But, think of a love relationship. On the one hand, a war can never be, never is a difficult word because of the uncontrollability. Within the midst of war, there can be resonance. I know it's an appalling idea, but I think it's true, right? When you live in the ruins and then in the sadness and the disease, then it might happen that this tiny smile of a child or so, or the small gesture of someone giving you a bread, is really creating a depth resonance, right? Tiefenresonanz, which is far deeper than everything we experience in our supermarket world or so, right? I really think we should not be too fast and exclude it there, right? But of course, nevertheless, generally, you can only be in resonance with something you open up to voluntarily, on the one hand, right? At least you somehow agree to it. So it's your own voice responding and not someone forcing you to do something, right?
Yes.
And also it has to be semi-controllable, I would almost say, because I cannot be in resonance with anything I have absolutely no contact to. Let's say it could be the Bible or the Capital. I always use these two because they are opposites, right? Capital by Marx or the Bible. A lot of people are in resonance with both books, right? And by the way, they are in resonance because somehow it's uncontrollable what the Bible says. I'm permanently discussing it with it. I don't quite understand it. I don't quite agree. I'm in a debate. That's resonance. And actually, it's the same with Marx because it's very hard to understand the Capital, right? But of course, you cannot be in resonance with the Bible or the Capital if you don't have any knowledge of it. It's completely unverfügbar, right? So it's semi-controllable. I can take it and I can read it, but I don't completely control it, right? So that's the form of controllability. So if you're bombed and hurt, generally that's of course it's the opposite of resonance, because then you close down. You're just hurting. The world literally turns deaf and dead and silent and hard and cold to you. Right?
Yeah, and you are the victim of someone who wants to have control.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, the people on the ground, so to say. Yes. But if we look at the powers, so Europe and China and the US, etc., they are in different positions.
Yeah, sure. But I think this is not the uncontrollability which belongs to resonance. So I think this is quite evident. As you said, within these scenarios, of course, scenes of resonance are possible.
Yeah.
But yesterday on TV, there was a Ukraine girl. There was a report from the Ukraine, and there was a little girl singing. It was really touching. Yeah. Maybe that's something, but yeah.
I would agree. There are small elements, kind of incidences of resonance. But the problem is, when I talk about modernity in the way I just did, I think I make a mistake, because it sounds like modernity is just destroying resonance, and I think that's too easy. That's actually what I wanted to say first when I started to write the resonance book, and then I realized how stupid that is, because modernity has also provided spaces for resonance, right? Giving people freedom to develop their own voice, right? For for example, women or so, right? It's not, I mean, for a long time in cultural history, and in some cases still today, they are not allowed to speak their own voice, to find their frequency in whatever it is in terms of, so modernity has created spaces where you can find your own form of belief, right? Your own form of profession or your own form of loving, for example, if you prevent forms of sexual desire, right, which are not heterosexual or so on, then of course it's kind of preventing people from getting in resonance. So modernity has tried in education, in family spaces and elsewhere, we try at least to create spaces of resonance which allow this kind of relationship.
And what effect has Corona had? I mean, we have been, well, it's been 2 years now, and a lot of students have been in classes only online, and a lot of other meetings and so on have been online. How does this relate to resonance? Can you have resonance in digital meetings?
Yeah, you can. I mean, the problem with the uncontrollability of the world, I mean, I think conceptually it's consistent, right? I claim you cannot engineer it, right? So you cannot say, let's have this setting. If the light is like this and the temperature is like this, then we will get in resonance. But the opposite is true too. You cannot exclude it, right? Even under the most unlikely conditions, there can be resonance, as we just said in the war, right? And therefore, certainly in digital encounters, sometimes there is deep resonance. I would think so. For example, I mean, I was just doing a seminar with students from Nanjing in China. It was really fascinating, right? Because it was on critical theory and sociology, and students in China had the chance to discuss with students in Jena and even in breakout rooms. And of course, sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't or so, right? But there are sometimes forms of resonance. But nevertheless, there are elements which make it difficult or unlikely. I say you cannot engineer resonance, but you can engineer spaces of resonance. And the problem with the digital world is, I mean, as we all know and have experienced, I mean, physical co-presence, like what we are doing right now, is different from screen presence from a number of reasons. I mean, probably the most important reason is that at the screen, you cannot look into each other's eyes. You can either see the other's eyes or the other one sees your eyes, but you cannot kind of exchange glances. And I believe really this is wired in our biology. We are led to read faces, right? It's beyond our control. My face and my whole body reacts to what you say, beyond my knowing, right? And a lot of this is kind of suppressed, of course. And it's also even in the acoustics, right? I discussed this. I was at a conference about listening and hearing. And I kind of was shocked what they told me that, if you digitally, the voice only comes through this kind of loudspeaker, but your own voice is different. I really experienced this when I thought, why is it when I give talks or lectures at a university for the whole day, I'm never hoarse in the Heiser at the end of the day. But when I yell at my microphone at home, I feel I lose my voice. Yeah. And then they really explained to me why this is. The way you experience your own voice while yelling at the microphone is different. But I think the most important thing is the physical co-presence, like what we are here right now, right? We all see the bright lights here. We feel the temperature, a certain smell in the air. And if there's a noise outside, for example, we all know that the others have the same noise. So we are already in a space of resonance, right? We listen to, or we hear what we hear. We smell what we smell. We see what we see. This connects us. And at home, when you are at the screen, you also have a surrounding. There is a smell and a temperature and a noise, but you have to block it out because it's completely irrelevant for the interaction. So this creates a kind of a bodily disposition which is kind of alienating or alienated. So it's at least more unlikely in Corona situations, right? And also there is a basic distrust. The other might be the killer. I mean, that's really bad, right? I mean, the other person you encounter potentially could kill you, right? Or could kill other people. And even worse, you could kill them because there's something in your body you don't know. So this, of course, kind of creates distrust between people. And distrust creates a kind of closing. It's not just Corona. For example, when you have a fear of the other, or when you are under time pressure, then you don't want to open up to spaces of resonance which are uncontrollable. When you are afraid, you don't want to have uncontrollable spaces. So I think overall the Corona effect is not too beneficial on us.
Right, but is let's say the negative effects and to make it unlikely that resonance happens in this lockdown situation in Corona. Is this more due to the fact that of the disease itself, or more to the is it an effect of the trying to get it under control, the disease under control?
Yeah, I agree with this. I think what Murney, I mean, Corona is interesting in terms of acceleration because for the first time in 250 years, we actually slowed down. You can measure it seismologically, right? The movement, the shaking or the vibration of the planet has gone down because 95% of the airplanes have been grounded or so. It's fascinating, right? And of course, it's interesting in terms of controllability because I think at first it was a complete shock because Corona or the coronavirus really is a monster of uncontrollability. We did not have scientific knowledge of it. We did not have medical control of it. We could not foresee the economic effects. We could not regulate it politically. And what is much worse, it was beyond our individual control. You cannot hear it, you cannot see it, you cannot smell it and touch it. It's definitely beyond control. So it's a total shock to our culture. The world is turning totally uncontrollable. And what we did then politically was trying to bring it under control at any price almost, right? I mean, we never paid a price like this, right? Ground 95% of the planes, stop all soccer games. That's outrageous, right? Close down the universities and so on. It was the desperate attempt. And at first they said, we want to track down every single infection. Yeah. This clearly is our modern standard reaction, try to bring complete control over it. But of course the problem is, as I said, that's why I'm pessimistic. I don't want to suggest otherwise. I mean, I don't want to suggest let it just happen, right? So I don't know. Yeah.
Let's turn to the questions from the audience, and I will look at the people at home first. So if you have questions and you haven't yet posted them, you can still go to Menti and enter the code in your screens.
You don't have to have a question, you can also just disagree.
I can already see that we have more questions than we can answer. So thanks a lot for you at home for participating and posing your questions. I will try to do what I can. Where shall I start? Let's see. Are we now in resonance with pollution? Somebody asks. Or can we be, maybe?
I don't know. I think not. I think not. I mean, for me, not every form of exchange is resonance, right? I mean, with pollution, I think. I think there are two. I mean, I distinguish actually between resonant forms of being in the world and mute forms or deaf forms, right? Which I use the term alienation, which maybe is not maybe it wasn't the best choice, right? But there are two forms of alienated relationship with the world. One is kind of total indifference, right? I mean, there are many things even in this space, in this room, I don't resonate with. I don't particularly resonate with this chair, but I'm just indifferent with it. I just sit on it and that's it. But then there is repulsion. I hate it, and actually repulsion repulsion for me is the opposite of resonance because it means because either repulsion means a kind of opposing powers, right? And it could be because I hate it, there's something I hate, then the repulsion is on my side, or because it's threatening me, right? I think it's dangerous, then the repulsion is from the other side. But in all cases, I want to refuse resonance. If it's threatening, I want to close and defend, right? And if I hate it, I want to hit it and to impose my will on it, right? So it's not resonance. And pollution, I think, certainly could not be something I want to open up to, get in contact with, be transformed by it. I might be afraid that it transforms me, but then I want to prevent it. So I think pollution is a very tough case. I think we cannot be in resonance with pollution. I mean, another question is, can we be in resonance with death? That's a tricky question. I leave that to the theologian.
Yeah, it's.
What would you say? Actually, I'm curious.
I think we can, of course, even if we do not have belief in afterlife also. I think we can resonate because it's the Heideggerian.
But is it mortality or death we resonate with?
Even death as the end of our life, as something which is gives a definite end to our life. Yeah. I think we can resonance should be possible with it.
I find it, maybe you're right, but I mean, my answer is that, I mean, death is the ultimate silence, I mean, at least, right? At least for us. And therefore, I think we can be in resonance with the fact of death, but not with death itself. But maybe that gets
but even you can interpret it in very many different ways. You can see it as absolute peace. So
that's right.
Silence, even if you do not believe in afterlife, it can be. It redeems you from all the problems you have, and so I think it's
possible.
It's at least possible. It happens. It's uncontrollable. But I think it's possible.
Interesting. Okay.
Somebody else asked: does controllability lead to conservatism, or let me add to fear, maybe?
Yeah. No.
Oh, both. You start with the conservatism.
I mean, that's a good question. I think it's a good question. I thought about it for quite some time. I thought, now I'm turning older, so apparently I'm getting totally conservative, which I don't like, right? But I think it's not. I mean, but it's true. I mean, controllability. I would say uncontrollability would lead to conservatism, right? Let things just happen, right? Let them just be, so to speak, right? So that could be an answer, but I mean, in many aspects, I think there are two ways. I mean, one way would be we control nature, right? We tell nature what to do. I mean, actually, I think of something. I mean, I want to be sensitive there, and I know it's difficult. But for example, also my bodily nature. For example, can I change my sex, my gender, right? For example, right? So it's a very interesting question. I think there you see there are two positions. One is, no, we should be able to decide. It's also about abortion, right? I mean, or the woman decides, right, whether she wants to have a child or not. So that would mean we are the sovereign masters. And then there's the other side who says, no, nature has made you a man or a woman, so you have to accept it. Or nature has given you a child, I mean, somehow, right? So you have to accept it. And I think both forms are not what I mean with resonance. Resonance means I take serious this kind of otherness with this, which is within me, either within my own body, actually in both cases with my own body. But it's not decided whether I do, so to speak, or whether the other takes the lead, but it's a kind of listening and answering and being transformed in this process. And I think this certainly is not conservative, right? Normally conservatism is just giving one side the voice.
I think to be open to be transformed, and
yes.
This is the opposite of conservatism.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think in political terms this is absolutely true. I think politically, we call the right-wing populists often or they call themselves identitarian. Yeah, the idea is we have to stay as we are. We are white, Christian, I don't know what, right? So we have to stay so. And they actually say, well, if we take in all those foreigners, we will be transformed. Yeah. And then, of course, my answer would be yes, exactly. That's the point of life, right? I mean, you're killing yourself if you don't.
You don't want to be exposed to the other,
yes,
because this might have a transformative power.
But even in their thinking, they even say, right, if you take in all these Muslims, there will be minarets in that instead of churches. Yeah. And there you really see the problem. Either it's my church or it's your minaret. And of course, that's the problem, right? No, it's in between. The minaret and the church get into kind of resonance, and the new will be born out of it. So it's not conservative.
Thank you. Let's turn to the audience here in the theater hall. If you have a question, please raise your hand, and one of my colleagues will come with a microphone. Yes, the lady over there.
Well, thank you very much. I was wondering, perhaps for Professor Rosa, but also perhaps for the other speaker to answer the question: would you think that our shortage of resonance has something to do with the decrease of religion in Western societies?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah. I thank you for this question. I would. My answer is yes. Right, but the question is, what is the cause and what is the effect, so to speak, right? I believe that you really see a kind of crisis of, in German, I would say, Anrufbarkeit, right? I mean, there is a German term, not the German term for to stop, aufhören, right? I mean, probably it's similar in Dutch, aufhören.
Ophouden, yeah, okay, yeah. But it doesn't have anything to do with hearing.
Yeah, that's the interesting thing. I mean, in German, when you say stop it, right, I would say hör auf, right? But it literally means listen up, so to speak, right? And I think I find this very interesting because normally I'm immersed. I have to do this, I have to do that. I'm short on time. Leave me alone, or so. Or what does this idiot want, or so? And aufhören would mean stop for a minute. and listen up. And the idea is, let yourself be called by something. Something is calling you, but you need to allow something to call you, right? And of course, that's the religious moment for me, right? Something is calling you. God has called you by your name, right? For example, or God has given you the breath of life, or so, right? So I believe. So my claim is there is a crisis of callability, Anrufbarkeit, right? We don't want to be called by God, but it's also the democratic problem. All the others who believe differently or who vote differently or have different opinions, we don't want to hear them. I want to kill them, right? Or drive them out of the country or whatever. And I believe even in our subjective, in our daily lives, we lose the capacity to be called, to be open to this transformative other, right? So I think probably that there is a crisis of belief and a crisis of democracy, and even a crisis of subjectivity has the same root, right? The crisis of resonance, so to speak. We no longer are capable of listening up and let ourselves be called. So I don't think that the decrease of belief is the cause of the social crisis. I rather think it's the other way around, right? Because we have created a world in which we don't want to be called, we lose our belief.
Yeah, I would agree, because I do not think that the decrease of religion. The question is where people in former times more callable. I'm not sure whether this is the case. I think that the concept of religion, of course, changed during the centuries. Is not the same. And in the Middle Ages or early modernity, the concept of religion was quite different from as we have it now. So I don't think if the diagnosis is true that there is a lack of resonance in our world. If this is true, I would not blame it to the decrease of religion. I would be cautious to answer this question with yes.
Thank you. Another question. Yes, in the back. the person most in the back. Yeah, well, anyway.
Where's my hand? If you go all the way at the back, it might be somebody else. Thank you for the very inspiring speech. I would love to go back to your example in Leipzig. And you said that the shining bright eyes would go down once you bring up bureaucracy.
Yes.
Is there a way to sustain and maintain resonance?
You mean in that case or generally?
Generally, and in that case, when you're talking to young people and there is also the reality and the resonance with the possibility, how do you keep the balance there?
Yeah, I mean, I think we would dream of, we had this idea of civil society as a kind of a living sphere of resonance, right, where people would kind of contribute. And, my idea is, I really believe there is a possibility, but it's very, very difficult, right? I always think there is a simple test. You could do it in Nijmegen, or for example, in my city, in Jena, in the small city. Actually, in the middle of the city, there is an empty square. It's a parking lot for 20 years. There has been a lot of discussion of what to do there, right? And I think there is a very simple test of whether there is a kind of resonance or not, because it depends on, you ask citizens now there is a new plan, right? And the question, there's a new plan and a new project. So the question is, do people say, oh, now we are building in Jena a new, I don't know, castle, whatever it is, a new building, right? A new library, for example, right? If people say, we are now building a new library, then there's a form of resonance. I am in contact with it. I feel self-efficacy. It's us, right? And they might say this even if they were not for building the library, but instead for building a shopping center or a theater or so, right? But I was taking part in this decision, right? And the other way is if they say, oh, now they are building this theater there, but it has nothing to do with me, right? So I think it's a very simple trick, right? But because you came with the example of Leipzig, you can do it in your school. I mean, even if, I'm not sure whether you, but let's assume some people here might be teachers, right? What do students and teachers say? Now we are building a new, or we are getting new windows, or now they are introducing new windows into our school building, right? There you actually see the difference between resonance and non-resonance. And the question is, can we politically, I think it's possible, but it's very, very difficult. And part of the problem is time pressure, right? Because it does take a lot of time to somehow create this space where people, I call it Anverwandlung, right? For me, there are two forms of appropriation. You cannot translate that either. I think I'm the nightmare of every translator. I mean, there is, in German, I distinguish between Aneignung and Anverwandlung. Aneignung just means I make it mine. I buy a book, so I have it angeeignet. But Anverwandlung means it's transformative. I call Aneignung, in English, I call it instrumental appropriation. Now I have it, I can use it. But there's a transformative appropriation. If you read the book, it somehow, you know, it changes who you are almost, right? So I think citizens need to use this kind of transformative appropriation of the structures they live in. And that's exactly the world I dream of, right? A resonant sphere, a resonant political and public sphere, but it's very hard to create. And there I cannot even turn to the theologian.
Not even, yeah.
No, and you were even speaking of time pressure, and I feel it too, because it's 9:30, which means that. What do you mean, Anuta? One more question? Okay, a short one then, please.
Okay, I'll try. My question is whether this middle voice, which I reckon is some kind of dynamic state, whether for you this is a state of relaxation or like acceptance, flow, or more attention. There's a Greek poet, I think it was a Greek poet, well, it sounds good. He talks about an instrument which is like a bow and arrow, and the bow is in tension, and he says the harmony is when it's tense. So is it for you a state and something you have to endure, or something that's loose?
That's a very good question. And I find it very hard to answer it. I mean, to answer it correctly. I think, I mean, as I said over dinner, I actually want to write on energy, right? My next book, because it has something to do with this, with the flow of energy, right? I mean, if you are, I mean, for example, if potentially you might say of this evening, right? There was so much energy in the space, or you might say the opposite. There was no energy there, right? So who